right, guys. Let me pull up the live chat. All right. I'm hoping that I've got you on live chat, but if you could let me know if you hear me okay, that would be great. I'm going to wait just a minute here for anybody to get on who might be running a little late, and then we'll rip into it. Everybody doing today? I hope you are well. Anyone out there give me a sound check? Oh, wow, cool. Thanks again, Steve. Appreciate it. How are you today, man? So my plan today is to actually do some hands-on. I realized one thing is I don't still have an active membership with MidJourney. I let it go when I got the hang of using Supermachine, but I still do have an active. Well, it's a free account, but it's a beta account for Leonardo. So if we get ourselves in a situation where we need to look at some of this stuff in Leonardo, we're good to go. But I'm going to do most of it in Supermachine, and the reason is not to not to beat people over the head about getting Supermachine, but the reason I think it's interesting is that I've been able to generate some really cool stuff in Supermachine using prompts that came from like MidJourney prop generators and all that kind of stuff. And we'll have a chance here when we get into it to for anybody who might be on the call and wants to offer up a prompt idea or two. We'll see how it does play a little bit with some of Supermachine's models, which I think really, it didn't used to have models. It used to just have basically, I think it was stable diffusion, and it was honestly, it was pretty rough. Outside of MidJourney, I think pretty much at that time, everything was rough. And, it's all changed with the addition of these models. And I don't know what Stuart is doing over there to close the gap between him and MidJourney. And I'll acknowledge that the gap is still pretty large, but he's also left behind what I've ever been able to achieve with Leonardo. Um, even MidJourney, I don't know if you guys have used it often, but you'd have to run like 4 images to get one that was close, and oftentimes you'd have to, um, sort of like I don't even know I can't even remember what the term is, but you'd also have to ask for variants of that image to see if you could get dialed in to where you wanted to go. And so it wasn't like it was, flawless and right out of the gate perfect. I've had significantly better luck running one image at a time with Supermachine and getting what I want than I ever did with uh, MidJourney. So even though I can't reach the heights with Supermachine, I don't think that I could with MidJourney. It's still pretty darn incredible. All right, so I'm going to switch over to my screen. I hope everybody's on that's going to be on by now. And if not, they'll just have to uh, catch up later. I have a feeling that a lot of this is going to be tough to read unless you've got a decent size screen, but let's do our best. I'm going to skip over this section. I put together this guide and I will link everybody to it in the video. It's just a small guide and there are some things that I want to add. So it's kind of going to be like a little bit of a living document because, uh, I'm learning, for example, Supermachine as I go, but to really get good at Supermachine, you've got to learn MidJourney prompts and prompts from all these chat GPT oriented um, prompt generators and stuff like that. And so even though I'm using Supermachine, the prompts are going to probably be broadly applicable for just about anything else, with the possible exception of those little tiny commands at the end of your prompt that you have to tell um, MidJourney to use, version 5, or to use an aspect ratio of 16.9, that kind of stuff. Um, Supermachine, for example, you pick all that stuff before you actually enter your prompt. So I'm going to go through this guide, like from a 30,000 foot view, so you guys can get an idea of the way I see images going into at least blog post content. I'm not as I'm not as in depth with social media um, image sizes, but you guys can weigh in on that if you think of anything, and we can certainly include it in the guide before it's over. So let's start with featured images. Um, Actually, you know what? I'm going to start by explaining one other thing. When images come off of these apps, um, I suppose if it interests you to do it, you can just go ahead and plop those images right into your blog posts. But I'll just point out a couple of things that I've noticed depending on the tool and the selection uh, parameters that you've put into the prompt or in the configuration. Oftentimes they come out much larger than what you need. And on top of that, if you use a post-processing tool, and I know many people use things like Photoshop. Is Photoshop Elements, I think, is another tool that does it. I've made a note down here lower in the guide. I use one called Affinity Designer 2. I started using Affinity when it was just the original version 1 during the pandemic. They had a crazy special online where you could buy it for like 25 bucks. Well, actually, you could buy any of their 3 tools or so, I think, for 25 bucks each. And so I got into it and I learned how to do it. And what I really love is you can work with templates. So if, let's say, for example, you're working with an image generator that doesn't give you exactly the measurements that you want for a particular type of art, you can copy that image, usually right from the image generator, paste it into your tool. In this case, I use Affinity Designer, like I said, and you can play around with what fits within any template that you've created. I'm going to go over some of the templates that I use for sizes here. Um, Hey, Steve, I just saw that you wrote a standard size of 840 by 525 and 80 quality. Um, Let me ask you a question. Is that a social media image, or are you using that for blog post content, either featured images or in content? Let me know. I'll keep going on the ones I use. So for featured images, just so that they look consistent on archive pages, category pages, I use 16 by 9 all the time. Um, some tools will generate 1920 by 1080. Um, some won't even do a straight 16 by 9. I think Leonardo used to give me problems with that. So anyway, I post process by taking the result from the image generator, plopping it into an Affinity Designer template that's set for 1280 by 720, and then I run an export. Okay, thanks, Steve, for info articles. So what I do after that is there's an export. I think I might, let me see. I'll just show you, like when you go to export, you're probably similar to this with whatever tool you're using, but I'll show you the difference. I'm always going to JPEG, right? So if I use best quality, which is essentially passing through the document as it stands, this 512 by 512 would come out at roughly 250K. That's 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 pretty good size. You put 4 or 5 of those in, not just a featured image, but within the body of your content, and you're beginning to really stress mobile devices. So what I do is, and this would be a square image for me, would be an example of something I'd use in content. I would drop that down to um, possibly high quality. You can see that it drops it by more than 80% in size. It's now roughly 46. Depending on the complexity of it and how rough it might look if you went lower, I might go down to medium quality. Um, if you pay attention to what renders over here, and I don't know how well you guys can see it, you'll see that there's not a tremendous amount of difference. And when you're people are working with a normal monitor, for example, these adjustments, while they look huge in terms of size differential for the image, the ability to see the actual quality changes is uh, not as problematic as you might think. So anyway, just an idea to keep in mind. I love this medium quality setting, which is a 45 for when I export featured images. Um, it's fantastic. They show up. Uh, I usually have them sort of featured images sort of right behind my blog post title, kind of fading into the blog post title. And they're perfect. And I run on a 3840 by 2160 native monitor, day after day. And so when I look at them, I see them at their maximum, rendered size, and the medium quality looks, you know, pretty excellent. So anyway, let me go back out. Let me get out of this. All right. So that's how I do featured images. Uh, I like to run them 1280 by 720, which is that 16:9 aspect ratio. It's not, to me, it's not so important what your final decision is about the aspect ratio of featured images. I think it's much more important to just use it over and over again. So in Steve's case, he threw out 840 by 525. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would run a featured image that tall in the aspect ratio. But regardless, the fact that if you stay consistent at 840 by 525 means that when somebody pulls up one of your category pages, or if you use a plugin, either for your sidebar or to make your category pages look better, or maybe you run it on the home page so that it formats your posts nicely and keeps people moving around the site. Anytime your aspect ratios for your images are uniform, it's going to look a lot more attractive um, than it would if you just download a bunch of crap off the web and uh, don't worry about it when you stick it in the featured image box. All right, so let's go down to in content. There are two forms of in content that I like to use, and I learned the hard way. Man, I learned it really the hard way. Um, that I used to love to write justify images around text. It always looked great on my desktop, and that's where I worked. And then eventually I bought, you guys probably remember that LTD that came out for, I think it was a couple of those programs that will allow you to see all on one screen what your web pages look like on different size devices. And I almost fell out of my chair when I saw that as the mobile devices got smaller, and it's getting to be a little bit less of a problem now because the resolution on those things is a lot better. But holy cow. Yeah, I got you, Steve. His niche is visual, so you have to make a sacrifice. I'm not in any niches where the visuals are really like super super primary. But anyway, going back to what I was saying, when I use Blisk for a view of what all the different mobile devices look like when they render my site, and what I would get is my image would be right justified, but over on the left-hand side of the image, going all the way down, there might be 2 or 3 letters from the text block that would render, and they would just keep wrapping their way all the way down the image until they got to the end of the image, and then it would return to normal again. And so what I learned was that WordPress doesn't really have a good method of dealing with an image that's smaller than the mobile device resolution. So what I do now that has pretty much fixed it is I make sure all of my in-content images that are portrait style, and by portrait, I don't mean square, but it could be higher than that. I don't really care about that. It's whatever is necessary for the image is I make sure they're all 440 pixels wide. I should write, I'm sorry, I did this wrong. Width, around 440 pixels. And then you can either left justify or right justify it within your post content. And in 99% of mobile device cases, you're going to get a good rendering. The reason is that if, for example, a mobile device, let's say it's a little older and only has like a 370 pixel resolution for the width. Well, it's gonna WordPress can take that 440 image and bring it down to meet the 370. But if you were using a 320 pixel width image on that 370 device, well, it can't do it the opposite way. Um, so anyway, that's just something to keep in mind. The other thing I do a lot for a couple of my niches is I use landscape also uh, important when, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, when the image that you're prompting is kind of like a story time or it's got an emotional component to it. I like landscape because generally stories need as much visual support as possible, and landscape allows you to get more than just your main character or your main thing in there, as long as you're prompting um, the way I'm going to show you here in just a little bit when I look at what I guess I would call it my typical prompt format. Um, at least it's the components that I like to cram into a prompt before I hit the generate button. The bottom line is with these 720 by 300 images, um, I like them to be pretty high quality because that's a decent width for an image. It's oftentimes just a tiny little bit smaller than the the text blocks. It's a little bit narrower, and so I center it across the um, the inner content width. I center it, and I keep the output level up to high for quality at around 85. It breaks up the monotony of scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. I generally will find a way. You probably already know these tricks, but if you're dealing with a wall of paragraphs, and there's just sometimes in what you're writing, it's really hard to get around having 3 or 4 paragraphs in a row. I already try to keep my paragraphs to no more than 2 sentences, but sometimes one or even both of those sentences is a little bit long. And when you string 3 or 4 of those paragraphs together, it starts to look a little ridiculous on most mobile devices. And so, I like to stick images in between there. I find something that's reasonably relevant to one of those paragraphs, especially there in the middle of the block of paragraphs, and get it in there. Anyway, that's my thought on both in-content landscape and in-content portrait photos or images. The in-content portrait stuff that I told you about, left and right justifying, it's really handy. Um, I love left justifying and right justifying. for a number of reasons. It really moves the eye around the page. And one other tip that I will give you, if you link images out to, let's say, for example, an Amazon listing or another affiliate listing or a sales page, something like that. If you've left justified or right justified on a desktop, the click-through ratio on images that that wrap that where content text wraps around the image is through the roof. It's easily, I would say, 2.5, maybe as much as 3 times the click-through ratio of images that are just in line, like these in-content landscape ones. So that may not, it might not confront some of you people who don't work with the affiliate business, or maybe you're selling a different way using your content. But for people who are used to the affiliate game or even sell their own products, um, images that are left justified and right justified really drive clicks to offers. All right, so let's go down before we jump into Supermachine. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the way I work my prompts. And look, I got to tell you too, a lot of times, because I've gotten the hang of this, there's only a few like off the shelf um, I'll call them descriptors, that I add to my prompts, um, and they're primarily for lighting. Like, in my opinion, and I've written a little bit about it here under story time and framing. In my opinion, every image deserves a little bit of a story at the beginning. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then framing, which I alluded to a little bit earlier, which is, let's say, for example, you've got a person. I'm going to go. This is a real out there example, but it's it works if you think about it. Let's say you've got someone who's a chronic insomniac, and if you know anything about chronic insomnia, over time, it really affects your performance. It affects relationships, lifestyle, life, but it really is a big hit if you're trying to work a full-time job. And so let's say you're about to write a blog post for insomniacs, and you're trying to impress upon them the importance of taking care of getting the problem addressed. And so one of the things you want to do to motivate them, using kind of like a problem, agitation, and then hopefully a solution format, would be to render an image of somebody sitting across from their boss at a review. It's not going so well, or maybe they're fired, right? That's a landscape image right there, because you got a boss's office, you got a desk, you got the boss there in his tie or whatever it is, and then your worker, whoever's going to be, appropriate to sit in the chair across the desk. So for me, that's a story. I would find a way I would actually like tell that story in a sentence, maybe even 2 sentences. Um, I usually don't use periods. I usually use commas as I'm doing it. You'll probably see that with some of my prompts if we get into some of those here in a few minutes. I think I've got a couple of medical ones in Supermachine that I can show you. But between story, which is the person's story, what's happening to the featured person um, in your image, as well as what's around that, that drives what aspect ratio you need. Do you need a landscape because of that scenario I just spoke to you about, or is it as simple as a young lady who's dealing with an acne breakout, and she's standing at the bathroom vanity, examining a zit on her cheek? Well, that's pretty much tells you right there that's a portrait image. You don't need a lot of extra framing for that. You just need sort of a story. You need a little bit of a story to explain what she's dealing with, what her emotions might be, because that's going to translate into how well the face, the facial expression is rendered. Maybe even her body language. That might not be the perfect example of her body language, but you get my point. What's she feeling? How's it affecting her? That kind of stuff. That's what I think a lot of. I mean, I've worked. Listen to me. I spent a lot of time in the MidJourney uh, generation rooms where I watched people create, you know, any manner of prompts. And MidJourney does a great job. It's actually amazing what they do accomplish with very little description. But I would say 90 to 95% of the images I saw generated, you know, even with the lighting descriptions and the aspect ratio descriptions, were no more than, let's say, 10 or 12 words. Well, if that's, if you don't have a niche or a website where moving someone into a call to action or solving or addressing a problem, maybe it is just an artsy website, or maybe you just want a social image um, to go with something. Maybe that'll work, but you know, from the standpoint of somebody who's been doing copywriting for a long time, I'm not doing websites uh, just to teach people stuff. My goal with my websites is to help them find solutions to a problem, and then I get paid when they take advantage of that solution. And so I'm not just creating like weird art of like an astronaut in a undersea water suit or something like that. It doesn't it's cute, it's cool looking, but it doesn't really pay the bills. So with my typical prompt structure, the one that I'm sharing right now, um, it's for people who are building action-oriented workflows for the people who attend or who visit their website. Now, this last part is the lighting part, and this is I mean, just off the cuff. If I'm doing like landscape scenes for outside, and I've had to do that for some travel-oriented stuff. I'm going to describe. Um, do I want do I want mountains in the background? Are they rolling hills? Are they snow-capped? Do they have? Are we talking about sunset lighting? Is it sunrise lighting? Is it midday, for example? There are a lot of other terms that you'll see on some of these prompts that can make a difference, but you really should tell it that. I noticed a lot of Midjourney people or Midjourney prompts that were sophisticated even got into like what lens to use. Now, I don't really know all that much about that kind of stuff. I'm not into photography, so I'm a little bit mystified by that. Maybe Steve or somebody else that's in the chat, um, would have a better idea than me. But um, that's the last part of my prompt. It is uh, trying trying to get across sort of like the vibe that the image, that the lighting and texture of the image throws off to support the story and what I've told it I'd like in the frame. Um, and then finally, most generating tools um, that are worth their salt. I don't think I don't think MidJourney. I can't remember now. It's been a few weeks. I don't think MidJourney really needs it or has a mechanism to do this. But if you can find, like in Supermachine or in Leonardo, I know Leonardo for sure has it, an opportunity to put in a negative prompt. These are things that I have accumulated from um, other images, other negative prompts that I've seen, and it's worth popping them in there. You'll get, I don't know that it helps on every image, but it will certainly help. And I've actually got some more sophisticated ones than this that I don't think I'll share because they're very niche specific, and I can't see, you know, I don't want to give away any like any particularly valuable niches that either my clients or that I run. So I'll probably stay away from that. But this is a great start. And basically what you should do is you should keep this like on Notepad plus plus, not far from you. And when you get to a point where uh, you see something in an image that you've generated that looks weird, come up with a way to state what you didn't like about it and add that to your negative prompt list. Um, it'll help. Let me see what Steve wrote over here. I would use time of day terms. There you go. Different time. I see. I don't know. Steve, here's what Steve said. He said I would use time of day terms and probably different type of lenses rather than specific lenses like some of them do. Magic hour is a good time of day prompt. Well, there you go. I would assume magic hour has got like some soft diffuse lighting. I noticed that with sunset lighting, I often get in an outdoors photo, I'll get like the some direct rays from the sun, like as it uh, drops below whatever it's dropping below. So it could be a mountain landscape. You'll get some of those like wild looking rays that come out. So anyway, it makes images very atmospheric when you get the hang of doing this kind of stuff. I don't pretend to be great at it, but um, I have played with it. And what's really cool is, despite what I said about 90% or 95% of images on MidJourney not having um, very long prompts, when you find the good ones, and I'm going to show you some of these other places to look, when you find people who really do know what they're doing with that atmospheric stuff, um, make a copy of it, keep it, play with it within the limits of whatever credits you've got to work with until you get to some magic formulas. Um, for me, I have a guide that I keep for myself that's niche specific. So it's like the starting prompt for that niche, and I have it saved into my key manager so that all I have to do is hit my tilde key on the keyboard and navigate to it, pop it in, and it's right there. And then I modify it with, whatever elements of story and framing I want to add in. Um, but let me show you a couple of the sites where um, you can see examples and you can determine like based on, I mean, look, there's a lot of fantasy stuff out there. That's one thing about MidJourney that used to drive me crazy, but it was pretty cool. Like this kind of thing, this isometric house, maybe maybe you're in niches where that kind of thing is appealing. Well, just click on it. Um, look at what they've done with the prompt. Now see, these guys haven't worried about lighting very much. Um, but you've still got a gorgeous um, atmospheric sort of feel to the vibrancy of the colors. RPG style, I'm sure, did that. Cartoony was the thing that softened, um, the definition of the lines. D&D, yeah, you know, I'm not sure what that adds, but fantasy and mobile game, yeah, you can see how all of this added up to um, this particular image. Now let's look for some that are a little bit more realistic. This is interesting. This is look, they've taken Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg um, because they're getting ready to fight each other in UFC, and they've come up with now look at this. This particular couple of uh, guide word, these batches right here are exactly the kind of thing that I use when I describe um, my stories for problem agitation solution type stuff. Similar in length. You know, their muscles ripped and shredded, the cameras flash from the immense crowd. Now, I don't see a ton of the camera flash. You see flash lighting, maybe for example, as it hits their shoulders and parts of their faces. But it's kind of cool. Let's explore the style. Let's see what they do here. So look, now I wouldn't call this realistic art, but it's based on you know, images that people have used of other. It looks like primarily celebrities, a lot of Elon Musk stuff. But you know, hey, what if you want? What if you're in a niche that's not particularly serious? Um, you know, that's not bad. It's not super realistic. Now, I'd like to, as a school bag, I'm not 100% sure why I would want to pick Mark Zuckerberg as a school bag, but that would be an interesting one, I think, to try in Supermachine with like a epic realism model, for example, and you can even take the image itself and put that into Supermachine along with the copy, you know, copying the prompt, modify the prompt a little bit, um, give it a little bit more leeway to make it, to turn it into a realistic view of Zuckerberg, and you'd probably come up with something similar. You know, kind of looks like he's at an airport or something like that. I can't really tell, but you know, you got your yeah, your backpack on the back of him. I think you could probably do something pretty cool with that in Supermachine. Maybe we'll do that. But bookmark the site if you haven't already used it before, lexica.art. Um, it's I would say it's in my top two or three favorites to go to, especially when I'm working with a new niche. You know, I'm doing new niches probably like once every couple of weeks. And generally they need a lot of, they do need a lot of art. And so I come to places like this to get ideas and begin to build like the basic prompt so that when I leave, you know, these examples, I've already got a starter prompt and I can just tweak it in whatever tool I want. A lot of times I'll use Leonardo for the tweaking part, and then I've been jumping over to Supermachine once I've got it dialed in pretty good and going to work over there. I'll leave this up. Maybe we can play with it in Supermachine in a minute because we've still got like 20 minutes left to go. All right, so here's another site. Looks to me like beautiful stuff for sure. Um, very very artsy, very um, very creative. Here's now look, this is a pretty realistic face. Sure, up close, you know, you can quibble that it's not ultra realistic, but it's pretty good. They've used terms like perfect face. I don't know that that's a cheerful look. Okay, here's some more lighting examples. A dramatic lighting, I think you can see that with um, whatever you call these things that are dotting the landscape around him. Amazing quality, I'll give it that. It's a Disney style now. I haven't used that one before, and I don't know exactly exactly what the influence of that is, but that I find that interesting. Here's another thing I didn't mention before. If you could find artists, and I have to admit, I found this to be kind of difficult to do. I spent probably half a day one time um, looking at a particular niche or genres, popular artists to see if I wanted to base an entire website needed overhaul. It needed featured images. It needed in content stuff. And I spent like half a day um, looking at the artists within that niche because it's a pretty big niche. And I was never really 100% satisfied um, with with using the names of artists inside the prompts, like over and over and over again. But I did compile like a Word document of 2 or 3 images that of art that the artist had actually done next to their name. And I made a list of all those people that I could refer to when I was looking for a certain style for a certain post. And that was helpful. So if you've got, let's say, for example, you're in the enviable position of not working in a lot of different niches, but you're in one and it's going guns blazing. Well, by all means, find artists and make a guide like that for yourself and use it to create, some pretty amazing stuff. Um, your website will, visuals are what they are. They're just, even though I've showed you how to reduce the quality level of images to so that you have an easier time clearing Google's hurdles for what they want in terms of site speed, site loading, especially for mobile devices. I still believe that when you wow people with the visuals of your website, they stay longer, and it screams that you bothered to put quality into what's there, long before they've even read a decent amount of your content. And let's hope you're not just posting junk next to amazing images, but if your content is similarly, let's say, edited, and um, you understand your niche, you've done your research. Well, the combination of really impressive visuals and helpful content is going to make an authority site a lot quicker than if you're winging it with one of these auto blogging things, and especially if you're letting the auto blogger go out and pull Creative Commons images that may or may not fit. You know what I'm talking about. There's tons of people who believe in that kind of thing these days, and I'm completely mystified um, at how they think that that's going to actually convert with people these days. I don't even care if they get 100,000 views in the space of a month. They're idiots if they think that that's going to lead to making a lot of money. I mean, you can hang your hat on tons of traffic, but it's basically, um, it reminds me, do you guys ever remember the website? I don't know if it's still out there, but I'll give you the address and you can look. It's called Ling's Cars. Um, I know it was overseas, somewhere in Asia, and I guess Ling is supposed to be the female that's depicted on the homepage. But I mean, things are flashing. There's so much going on, and it's got something to do with cars. And when you look at it, you get a headache in about 15, 20 seconds. And I can't imagine that it converts. But it gets traffic out the yin yang, mostly because people can't pull their eyes away from how crazy it was to design something like that. I'm just suggesting that in an age of, dirt cheap AI generated content and even AI generated images, or auto bloggers that pull images from crappy places using suspect methods of pulling them based on keywords that may or may not be helpful for what you're writing about. Um, you're setting yourself up for failure, regardless of what the traffic numbers say. And with that, I'll get off my soapbox. Um, all right, so anyway, um, to break this down a little bit um, into my image prompt area, and it doesn't really fit all that well. I mean, you've got things like cheerful look. Um, you know, that would be a very basic start to how I would probably tell a story. In this case, it would, you know, young prince um, on his first hunt or something like that. I don't want to drag it out, but you get what I'm saying. I would work more on that to give this thing uh, some incredible personality, and I would also, when I generated it, I would want it to look um, much more realistic. Like this owl, um, you know, it doesn't match up with a scarf or anything like that. So it's a fantasy image, and I would be trying to make it into something, you know, real with a story. Then I go into, you know, here's your framing, your forest background, tree branches, blue ice fire moon, um, so on and so forth. And then you begin to get into your lighting stuff, your dramatic lighting, digital painting. That's your mode or your art genre, I guess you would say. Um, Cute, best quality Disney style. I gotta find out more about this Disney style. Disney style. I have no idea what WLOP is, and then we're into some of the articles. Um, so let's go. Steve wrote something about realistic images, and I'm going to show. I'm going to jump over. Oh, there's one other one here too, by the way. Cree. This is another one. Um, I'll tell you, it's search.crea, K-R-E-A dot AI, playgroundai.com, and lexica.art. You got to be able to get a fair amount of ideas. You're probably going to get more in the fantasy or artsy uh, motifs than you will in the realism stuff. But you can get pretty close, and you will find realistic stuff in there. But I'm going to take you over to my Supermachine here for a little bit, just to show you what I typed in with to get some. Now this is using a model called Epic Realism, which is one of, you go up at the top here and you see all of their models. We'll look at it. And I'll pull up the screen. You guys can see this, right? Okay. Um, So none of this was here several months ago. I mean, I don't know exactly when it showed up. I've had this LTD with a friend of mine for a good long while, and neither of us were drawing on the credits because early, well, you know what Stable Diffusion was early on, just wasn't very good. But as you can see, uh, it's come a long way. It's certainly workable. I fell in love because a lot of my niches, you know, work with, you know, real people and real problems and what I like to call real solutions. You know, that got me into the epic realism one. And this was what I looked that's kind of cool, that Dream Shaper. Um, so if I can show it, let me see, try to pull it up. Okay. So if you look at epic realism, and this is their examples, you can see how realistic this guy's uh, aging is, the wrinkling, the hair is particularly on point for a guy of that age. Um, the flesh areas, you know, his girth, you know, at that point in his age, even the detail on his armament that he's wearing here, adornment, whatever you want to call that. Um, here's I guess this is supposed to be a witch, but you know, you see again, we're talking about you know, great lighting over here in the distance, and we'll look at what I think I drew upon some of this stuff to create my initial prompts with this model. But I mean, you can't get much more realistic than what that looks, other than the fact that wearing a crazy witch's outfit. But you know, if you need that kind of thing, it's pretty darn impressive. Maybe if I was hoping they would let me pull it up. I swear. Wonder. Hang tight for a second here. Let's see what this. We can look at some other ones, and hopefully, yeah, this will give us some prompting. So look, I did look at this earlier. Now this is some cool prompting right here, and it's not particularly complex. Professional portrait photograph of a handsome Norwegian male in winter clothing, with short blonde hair, freckles. I don't really see the freckles, but maybe that's just a image size thing. Um, Wearing elegant, warm winter fashion clothing, standing outside in a snowy city street. Now, you got to admit, you really can't nail it much better than that, right? I mean, that's if MidJourney does a better job, then albeit, but in in my experience with that type of photo, that's pretty much right at MidJourney level of quality. And here are some more things you can pull. I don't know if this is the exact one that I have, but it looks pretty close. Um, so they've done this, and this is another thing you get to choose within Supermachine. You choose the sampler, and what I love about Supermachine is this is a really, really quality output, and it used 20 steps, which is the minimum. If you don't mind using more credits, you can go up to 80 steps. Um, I found the quality differential to be marginal, um, but that doesn't mean it would be marginal in everything. It might make the difference. And I can't remember what the difference was in terms of the credits that it required, but I've run everything so far at 20 credits and, or excuse me, at 20 steps. It costs for a widescreen, I think it's let's see, I'll tell you. Um, These are some images I ran. Let's see if it tells under advanced settings. Okay, it doesn't say, but typically what I'll do, and this is a perfect example of like how you got to play around with what you want. I'll run at landscape and this 1280 by 720 at 1.8 credits. Now that's here's where you choose your sampler. This one, let's see which one. Yeah, this one is really good right there, the Keras one. Um, you can choose the number of prompts. We're still at 1.8 credits. So let me change the number of steps just so we see how it goes up. It can really get up there. Look at that. 80 takes double the number of credits. I've got a ton of credits. Why don't we run this one? It's a male physician wearing a lab coat in a patient exam room. Oh, I'm gonna do this. A young man sits across from the doctor as they discuss his health. Serene. Steve, what kind of lighting um, changes would you put in something like this? Um, I'll wait for just a second while Steve weighs in, and we'll try to play around um, with the details and see what we can get in there before we run the image. Actually, you know what? We'll run two. Um, Highest quality. Now this was in a prompt that I found earlier. I haven't changed it. I don't really know what kind of a difference it makes for this guy, but it's been really effective. Um, Reading Steve's comment, sorry. Uh, yeah. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and run this. Let's take a look at what we can get out of this for our 7.2 credits. Let's take a little minute, and if it's busy, it can take it up to a minute to run it. Okay, Steve, if we run it again, I'll try. He suggests something like diffuse lighting coming through a nearby window. Let's see what we get right out of the gate. Um, this one, It's a little weirdness around the fingers, um, but it's realistic otherwise. It it looks like you would consider that the position, but no young man there. Um, I'll be honest, this is at 80 steps. I don't see it any better than the 20-step ones that I've run before. Um, this with 2 lab coats actually doesn't work. Um, it's not a patient position sort of rendering. Um, and there's also something a little strange right around that guy's mouth. So yeah, that was not one of my better results. I'll show you what I got um, running before. Shoot, it scrolls the ones. It only keeps what, like the last 3 or 4, something like that. It's a shame. Um, I was able to get with 20 steps and these instructions. I was able to get ones where um, the guy next to the doctor did not have a lab coat on. It had like a, shucks. This is with Euler A for a sampler and only 20 steps. And you have to admit, it looks pretty good. The only, the only potential problem is this looks like a lab coat, or you could consider it, a white shirt. I don't know. It's not definitive, but I was able to get them where one guy had like he didn't look like this guy, but he had a flannel shirt on, sitting next to the doc. Uh, Now this you could pull off as a white shirt for sure because of the way it's made. So you could actually get away. It's a little weird how the guy is looking at the screen, but one of the things that really I think demonstrates how good this tool has become is, I mean, just check out this guy's face. Even though he's looking at the camera, probably be better if he was looking at either his paperwork or at least in the general direction of his patient. But I mean, just check out like how good um, his face turned out. Now, the hands, that's a little weird because he's got his hands together. I can't 100% tell you that if I zoomed into like, 800 times, 8 times current size, if I wouldn't find a little bit of an issue with his hands. But there you go. It does show you that for 1.8 credits, you know, which is a drop in the bucket on one of their plans. You can get some really good stuff. Here's another one that I created. And it's a simple story. Guy sits at a broadcast board with a microphone hanging down in front of him and a set of black headphones on. I don't know why it threw these extra headphones in up here, but the reason I pull it up is you can also see it's 20 steps using the Euler A and a smaller image size that's portrait. It's flawless, like as it relates to um, his face. I can't, and even this background stuff looks, I don't know what it's supposed to be depicting, but if you look at it, it looks reasonable for what would be on a computer monitor in, with a guy that's involved in audio or maybe even audio and visual stuff. So um, I don't know. I hope we'll probably do more of these with some more sophisticated stuff, maybe as we get a bigger audience and we've got more people throwing out ideas. I can certainly understand how we could rapid fire tackle some prompts with some stories and framing and I'll put together. Tell you what I will do. I will share that Word document that I put together for the guide, but it will be a living document in the sense that I'm going to go through these things and find some of the better information that I can share from my existing prompts, as well as the lighting stuff. Maybe I'll get together with you, Steve, over in um, uh, Discord, and maybe we could talk in a private message a little bit about some of the camera stuff that you were talking about, the lens stuff, and we could put together some better options because I'm really weak in that area, not having any kind of a photography experience to rely on. But yeah, so I hope that helps. I will have the guide in its raw form up um, shortly after this live ends, and I'll try to make some changes, maybe even today, because I've got some images that I've got to work on. Try to make some changes to the guide, and I'll let especially you folks that are in the Koala Discord group know when it, the day has gone on and you've got better uh, a better version of it to download, a more complete version. So thanks for hanging in there with me. Um, Steve, thanks for all of your input. I really appreciate it. Hope you got something out of it too. If not, if anybody has suggestions for how to make this more useful, you got to know, man. I'm totally cool with it. Just hit me up. I'm in Discord. You can contact me through, there's multiple ways to contact me through the links that are on this channel. Um, if you want to get notified when we do this next, which may be tomorrow, certainly by Thursday, come up with another subject, probably back to text generation and prompting, but because I've got some stuff I want to do with draft outlines, I want to show you for how to take them to the next level before you actually generate final blog posts. So I want to work on that a little bit and see if I can get a presentation together. If I can't pull that together in time to do it properly tomorrow, I may just boot tomorrow's session, come back on Thursday and do a really good one. With some stuff that you can download to refer to when you work on it on your own. Anyway, this is Joe. I'm signing off. Thanks for hanging in there with me.